All right, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Why don't we start with a word of prayer?
Good.
Gracious God, we give you thanks for this beautiful weather we've been enjoying lately, for the opportunity to emerge from a winter slumber and from our own sheltering because of the pandemic. Lord, we pray you're with us in this time of transition, personally and as a church, that you may guide us in the most appropriate ways for us to step into this new reality. Lord, let us learn from your disciples as they become apostles this day, as they emerge from their hiding and into a whole new world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so this weekend is Pentecost Sunday, the traditional birthday of the Christian church. So if you're coming to worship tomorrow, either in person
Wear red.
or online, wear your red for sure, please. All right, so we have a long reading for today. We're reading Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 21. Again, Acts 2, verses 1 through 21. And I will share it on the screen. All right, do we all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And this one's so long that if we want to break it up, we can. So if somebody wants to start reading, we'll have somebody read the coming of the Holy Spirit through verse 13. And then if somebody else can jump in for Peter addresses the crowd, verse 14 through the end.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven, there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind. And it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound, the crowd gathered and was bewildered because each one heard them speaking in a native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all those who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that what we hear, each of us in our own native language?" Parthians,
Yep, have fun with this part, Owen.
Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. In our own languages, we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power. All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine."
Hey, somebody else want to take over to the end?
I can, but Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "Men of Judea and all of who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning." Oh, wow, it's early. No,
Early risers.
yes, it's actually 9 o'clock right now too. Anyway, sorry. No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and young men shall see visions, and your old men shall see dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heavens above and signs on the earth below, blood, fire, and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved.
Great. Thank you, guys. So yeah, that first part that Owen was reading is a mouthful for sure.
That's what I get for volunteering.
Yeah, I think that was my final exam to become a pastor, was to be able to read those.
Medical school.
Yeah, right. You get world history there. You get to learn all the different regions.
Right.
So I just saw something that said Cretan. I guess that's from Crete, right?
Crete. Yeah, the island of Crete.
But how did the word Cretan become like, you know what I mean? It's
Like every other word, Rich.
a Cretan, you're a
Different
Cretan.
meaning as time goes on.
Yeah. Yeah, the poor Cretans got a bad name, huh?
Yeah.
The Greeks and the Europeans used to look down on them. That's why.
Yeah.
They were like Podunk Island. That was an afterthought.
Huh.
So after Jesus rose from the dead, but before he ascended to heaven, which is what happened right before the reading we had today, Jesus instructs the disciples to remain in Jerusalem and wait for the Holy Spirit. Jesus promised the Holy Spirit to empower the disciples to be witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Now, during this time, Jews from all the known world, they gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate Pentecost, an agricultural festival commemorating the first fruits of the harvest. Although they came from many lands and spoke in a variety of languages, these devout Jews, they were united in their heritage. On the actual day of Pentecost, the disciples were all together in Jerusalem, waiting as Jesus instructed. So imagine
Lost your
the
sound.
disciples. Go ahead. Oh, and what were you saying?
I lost the sound for a minute. Now it's
Oh,
back.
gotcha. Well, imagine, what do you think the disciples were talking about as they're huddled together in that house and said with the doors and windows locked for fear?
I guess they're probably worrying about what's next.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Probably trying to figure out what Jesus meant when he was saying that the advocate was coming.
I'm sure they were confused. Yeah.
Well, that's their pretty normal state throughout the Bible, right?
Yes.
They are. They're confused. They're disorganized. They're afraid. They are really, a splintered. Even though they're together, they're really just not empowered at all. But then everything changes. Suddenly, a loud sound interrupted their waiting as a violent wind filled their house. And actually, the Bible study just writes a violent wind and tongues of fire, but in the description, it says that it was something like
Right.
a violent wind, something like tongues of fire, which means it was so extraordinary that there are really no words to accurately describe it. This was just the closest thing to whatever it was that they saw and experienced. So then these tongues as of fire passed through the room, touching each of them. Each was filled with God's Spirit, and they began to speak in other languages. So no doubt they were speaking in languages they had never personally studied and maybe not even ever heard. This wasn't a human event. It was God's mighty Spirit at work, transforming these scared disciples into power-filled witnesses. And then from this day forward, we don't call them disciples anymore. We call them what?
Apostles.
Apostles, because now they're leaders. They're totally transformed in the blink of an eye. So how would you describe that scene in your own words?
Scary. It's scary to be there and witness all
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Chaotic.
Confused.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Exhilarating.
Yeah. If you're part of that, yeah, I mean, you're in the midst of something special, for sure. What do you think you would be feeling if you were one of the disciples or apostles?
All the above.
Yeah,
Yeah, right,
yeah, kind of what the heck am I doing here?
right.
Well, it said they felt the power, right? They
Yep.
felt powerful.
Maybe they felt a little confident then.
Yeah, that's a good description, Owen, because we definitely see it's like a light switch flips.
Right, right.
They are totally different from this day forward than they were before. Before they were disorganized, they were confused, they were unsure, they were scared. Leading up to this time, they all either went into hiding or denied Jesus or, failed to speak up at any point. And now they're filled with that power, filled with that boldness. All of them at some point are going to be martyred for their faith. So they were transformed from this group that was scared to look out for their own neck to one that was willing to give everything to share God's good news.
Does it say anything about, so now all of a sudden they can speak and understand other languages? Does it say that they kept that ability?
It doesn't say.
Okay.
It
Because you
doesn't.
would
And
think that would help them spread the word to the rest of the
yeah,
country, the rest of the world, yeah.
yeah. It doesn't seem like in future stories,
Yeah,
it doesn't seem as if they have that ability anymore. Because there are moments where they shift into translations and having conversations with others, but then they go back into Hebrew together. So, or Aramaic, I should say. So it seems like it was a one-time event for them.
They just didn't have Google Translate on their phones.
They didn't. And,
Not at that time.
no. Yeah, technology is amazing.
Helped me out a lot
Um,
with Misa.
they had Dougal, not Google, they had Dougal.
Google.
yeah. Yeah, it is amazing though. When I was in Colombia last year, I had an app on my phone. It wasn't Google Translate, but it was a different version of that. And I mean, it's great. You just talk into it and it talks for you.
Mhm.
When I would get stuck with my Spanish.
Wow.
Well, the noise was so loud that it attracted a crowd. Everyone was amazed, perplexed, and confused, like you were saying. How could these Galileans have the capacity to speak in languages from faraway places? Languages not studied by the Galileans. As an aside, you guys have all heard of speaking in tongues, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
That evangelical Pentecostal churches tend to do. This is different from that. When you speak in tongues, it sounds like gibberish to the human ear because it's supposedly the language of God and the language of angels. But this is different. This is the opposite of that. They're speaking in a way that everybody can understand rather than speaking in tongues, which is the opposite. So in addition, the disciples aren't just babbling in other languages or talking about the weather. They're giving clear testimony to God's mighty acts. So now put yourself in the place of the crowd. What if you were in the crowd that day? What would your reaction be?
Now, have they left the house and they're out in the crowd?
They're out in
speaking
the
tongues?
street. They literally, the wind or the rush like a violent wind literally blows the doors open and blows them right out the door. It shoves them out the door into the street.
Okay.
So imagine these 12 guys bursting into the street, speaking in ways that suddenly you understand them.
People thought they were drunk, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Right.
one of the first things they tried to do is explain it away.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right? This miraculous thing is presented right before them, and they come up with, the quickest, what they think is the most logical explanation. How often do we do the same thing? Something miraculous happens in our life and we're quick to find a rational explanation for it
Yeah.
No,
and explain it away rather than just appreciate it and take it in.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the crowd is doing. They see something that doesn't look right, that is, outside their concept. And so they try and find the most practical explanation for it. But Peter's not having it. And again, Peter, I think, really highlights this transformation. This is the Peter that denied Jesus. This is the Peter that ran and hid. This is the Peter that gets it wrong over and over and over again. Whether it's Jesus forecasting his arrest and betrayal, or at the transfiguration when Peter wants to stay on top of the mountain, Peter always seems to get it wrong. And it's at this moment that Peter clicks into gear. It all finally comes in line for him. And Peter becomes the rock that Jesus had told him he was going to be. So Peter was inspired to speak to the crowd. Again, same man who cowardly denied Jesus 3 times. But now that he's filled with the Holy Spirit, he gave a courageous witness to God and God's activity in Jesus Christ. And Peter is wise enough not to use his own words. Instead, he gets up and he quotes scripture. That God was fulfilling the prophecy of the Old Testament through the disciples. God's Spirit had come and transformed them. Sons and daughters, slaves and free, women and men were to be involved in God's mission, turning the world upside down. Before this, you had to be educated in order to be in relationship with God, right? You had to go to the rabbi who would pray on your behalf to God. You weren't able to have direct access to God. Literally, the Holy of Holies in the temple was sealed off, and that was where the Jews believed God lived. And it was curtained off, walled off to the normal, regular person. Well, you see, the complete opposite happens here. They're burst into the street. They go to where the people are rather than the people having to come to God. So the whole world is turned upside down. The young would see visions and the old would dream dreams. So how did the prophecy from Joel become reality on that Pentecost?
Well, I think by them being blown out, I mean, they probably were, people knew, and maybe not all the visitors, but a lot of people in Jerusalem knew that these were the people that hung out with Jesus.
Uh-huh.
And at this point, they figured they were just a ragtag bunch of nobodies, and they had finally silenced them. They had killed the leader, and they're in hiding, and especially the religious leaders thought, that's the end of them. We got rid of them. And now, they're like, what is this? Like, who gave them this power? Like, where did, they went from hiding to preaching in seconds.
Yep.
And, and not just preaching to just a few people, but to preaching to a multitude in their own languages. I mean,
Yep.
I would think if there were any of the religious leaders in the street, which I'm sure there were, they probably got really scared.
Yeah, they probably had to change their tunic after that. Yeah, because this is serious, right? No, for sure. Yeah, all this, they thought it was all over with. They thought they finished it off, and now it comes literally roaring back with even more life.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Go ahead.
I'm just saying also too, just as a side note, these were the times when the tension was the worst in Jerusalem, because there were so many people that were brought in for whatever festival was going on, that was when the Romans were really tense of, we got to watch out for any uprising or, so I mean, it was always very tense in Jerusalem when there was a festival.
Yep, exactly. Still the same today.
Right.
When you have
Yeah.
in Jerusalem, you know, when large groups are gathering together, there's more opportunity for unrest, people stirring one another up. So Vicky's 100% right. The Romans were very nervous during this time to
I'm
maintain.
guessing that those former leaders, the Pharisees and all, I'm guessing that they ran and hid. Right? The hunters became the hunted.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they didn't give up quite that easily. They tried to, you know, stamp these guys out. But the more they tried, the more it spread. You know, this at the end of Peter's sermon, this has got to be the most effective sermon ever. It said that he baptized 3,000, and they didn't count the women or children
Right.
out of that.
Wow.
That's pretty. I mean, if you figure you can at least double it, you got 6,000 converts based on one sermon, and he didn't even have to use his own words.
Right.
You didn't have to write it.
Aren't effective.
You're right, you're right, yeah.
So on Pentecost, the disciples made a choice to be together and wait for the Holy Spirit. They probably didn't know what to expect or when the Spirit would appear, but they chose to be there together and ready. So what other choices did those first disciples make? What kind of choices have they made throughout the gospel story?
Well, they're still making the choice to not go back to their old lives.
Yep.
You know, they did try for a time. They did go, a few of them went fishing, and that's when Jesus appeared to them again.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, I'm sure they're wrestling with the fact of, you know, while they're sitting in this room, as they're probably talking about, you know, do we go back to our old lives? Can we go back to our old lives? And probably most of them couldn't. You know, their fishing boats at this point are gone.
Yeah.
You know, Matthew can't go back to the tax collector booth.
No.
He's already burned that bridge.
Yeah.
So, you know, it probably had to be pretty scary. You know, we gave up everything, and now what's before us? But I think on Pentecost, their answer was given to them. You know, this is what Jesus promised us. This is what we were going to be doing. They thought they were going to do it for those 3 years with him, but now it's when it really gets kicked into gear.
Yeah.
Now is when they're really going to become fishers of men.
Yeah. Like I said before, they probably got a lot of confidence that they did not have
Mhm.
before.
Yeah, I mean, even after Jesus spends time with them post-resurrection, even that wasn't enough to fully kick them into gear. It prepared them and it got them closer, but it wasn't, like Vicky was saying, it wasn't until the Holy Spirit came that it finally took them
Right.
to that next level. But you touched on an important point there that, you know, maybe that only happened because they stayed together. You know, had they gone back to their normal lives, they wouldn't have been there
Right.
that day.
Right.
The opportunity wouldn't have been there for them. So how did we're basically at this point already, but how did the Spirit change the lives of the disciples?
Well, as we talked about it, that it gave them confidence to go ahead. They felt it from within at that point, where they might have just been taking things here and there as they went along. Now they really had the knowledge and the want to go ahead.
They became proactive.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. And again, they went from being disciples, students, and students that couldn't have a thought for themselves, right? They relied on Jesus to tell them everything for those
Right.
3 years, right? And to the point that when he ascends into heaven, they're left standing there staring at the sky, not knowing what the heck to do next,
Mm.
right? And it's not until an angel comes and tells them, okay, get going, that they actually go. But it's, you know, it switches now that they become decisive. They start to make decisions for the community for themselves. And it's not to say that they suddenly had every answer, right? Because they have major debates in those early days of what the church is supposed to look like. You know, do we open it for Jewish converts only, or do we open it to the Gentiles? You know, there were a lot of discussion and disagreements even, and arguments about what was the best thing to do, but they were making the decisions themselves now, rather than waiting for somebody else to make them for them.
No,
So
I
now-
think about the, this
Go ahead.
sounds silly, but I think about the Wizard of Oz in this situation where the Scarecrow finally gets it and, you know, starts his speech on whatever he was talking about, that it was, you know, like a revelation to the person itself that, oh my goodness, I do have this in me, and then they can go forth. So,
Yeah.
you know, bringing in a little culture, our culture
Yeah.
here.
No, and Patty, right along with that, I mean, you have that transformation of the black and white in the beginning, and
Right.
you know, the old world, and when they come into this new reality, it's like,
Boom.
you know, boom, you know,
Yeah.
it's an explosion.
Yeah,
And that's, in a lot of ways, that's what it's like for the disciples.
right.
You know, their eyes finally get fully open. They finally can see the world through God's eyes, you
Yes.
know, in a much larger, deeper way.
When this all happened, when did Peter and Paul start their rivalry?
It's probably maybe a year later, 2 years later. Because remember, Paul was still
Paul
a
was
bad guy when Stephen
Right.
got stoned.
Right.
So it doesn't exactly give a timeline. But yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of time that's going to pass still. Paul's still a bad guy right now.
Okay. I was just curious at the,
Yeah.
'cause not much is mentioned about it.
Yeah, no, they just have the appearance of Paul just kind of on the periphery here and there as Saul, until he has his conversion moment on the road to Damascus.
Because then that really opens it up to everybody, not just the Jews.
Right. And that's when they had the Council of Jerusalem to have a meeting of the minds to debate whether or not they were going to base the church out of Jerusalem, which is what the 12 disciples wanted to do,
Uh-huh.
or as Paul wanted, to make it global and open it to all people. And I mean, it really became a debate that it threatened to divide the church right from the outgoing. They were really, I mean, Peter and Paul, I would argue that they respected one another, but they really, really disagreed in those
Agreed.
early days.
Yeah.
Really disagreed. And that's what I'm saying. It's not that once they had the Spirit, they suddenly had all the answers, right? It's not like everything just went smooth from there. They still had a lot of debate and discernment that they had to do. And there were times where they didn't know the right answer. But, you know, now that they had the Spirit, they were able to work together to find those answers.
Well, I kind of feel like it was that what the Spirit did for them was not only give them the confidence, but the Spirit actually finally made them realize that their mission was to spread God's love.
Mm.
You know, I almost feel like that was the switch
Yeah.
that flipped. You know, it before when they were scared and not knowing what to do, you know, they were thinking, you know, were they going to be called to be another Jesus? Were they going to be called to, you know, but I almost feel like on that day, it was just like, oh, we just need to go out and tell people about Jesus's life and how he showed us God's love.
Yep.
You know, for me, I equate like this, my Pentecost moment happened on a Tres Dias weekend where, you know, I mean, I was going along and I was going to church for years and hearing all of this stuff, but on that weekend, all of a sudden it was like a switch flipped and I said, this is just about God's love. And that's all I'm being asked to do is to go spread God's love to other people. You know, and so I kind of feel like, you know, I mean, and then you get into the bigger debate. Well, how do you spread God's love? Do we do this? Do we do that? What does the church look like? And that's where they had their problems. But
Yeah.
the core message was just go out and tell people about how Jesus showed you God's love.
Right. Right. And along with that, they're transformed from being worried about themselves
Mm.
to now worrying primarily about God. Not, and worrying is the wrong word, about
Right.
focusing on God.
Right.
And in that, it transforms the church. And the church becomes something beyond anything that it could have been otherwise.
Right. And at that point, too, the only thing that they had been concerned about as Jews was keeping the law. And now they realized it's not, you know, and Jesus had showed them that for 3 years, that it's not about the law. It's about God loving you.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, because the law had become a tool for selfishness.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It was being used as a way to say, well, this is how I'm going to make myself better or elevated from other people, rather than recognizing that it's not about me getting up to the level of God. It's about God who came down to me.
Mm.
You know, the pouring of the Spirit out into the street. All right. Good discussion today, everybody. Well,
Yeah.
we're going to close in the Lord's Prayer in a moment. Let me just pull up my calendar and confirm when we're meeting again. All right. So we are together again on June 12th, I believe. Yes. We'll be in person for that. So just as we get closer, things are changing fairly rapidly on guidelines and distancing and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, we'll wait until that week before and then really make a determination on what we're doing as far as masks and all that are concerned. Okay.
So what was the date again? June
June 12th.
12th?
And we're going to be in the community room. Probably most likely.
Yeah, we will. We will. And then as far as distancing and masks are concerned, that'll be to be determined. Right now, what the CDC and the state are saying is if you're in a small group that is mixed, everyone should wear masks. If you're in a large group and you're able to have separate sections like we're going to have in worship, then you can have kind of both end. But let's see where we're at in a couple of weeks, and then we'll make that decision for Bible study, okay?
Sounds good to me.
I mean, I know that there are people who want to come back, but they don't want to do the virtual. So that will be communicated that, okay, this is happening.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, for sure.
Beyond
All
this
right.
group right here is what I'm saying.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Beyond this group right here.
Yeah. But again, I think, you know, right now we're trying to be sensitive that, you know, this is going to be a transition process for us. And we're probably not going to get it 100% right as we do this, but we're doing our best effort here to make people feel comfortable and safe and free and, you know, cater to people who are all over the spectrum right now. So You know, I mean, I'm vaccinated and I still, my default is to put my mask on. It feels weird to not have it on at this point.
And so used to it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's like a level of PTSD or what that we're all kind of communally coming out of here, but we're all going to deal with it in different ways. So, you know, there are going to be some people that have other health concerns or whatever. And even though they're vaccinated, they're going to choose to still be distanced and masked, and that's fine. And there are others that are going to be ready to rip them off. So, you know, we're just going to need to balance how to keep everyone as comfortable as possible as we go on different tracks here.
Makes sense.
Yeah. A whole lot could change in the next 2 weeks.
And I mean, it changes by the day.
Right.
I mean, I got a text from, I'm doing a wedding right after this out in Oakdale on the water. And I got a text last night that they were shifting the wedding start time because of the different CDC guidelines, and some things they don't have to do now, and they're going to be able to get everybody in faster. So they were shifting the wedding forward by a half an hour.
Huh.
So, I mean, literally things are changing by the day.
Yeah.
The bishop had promised that they were going to give new guidance that they were going to share before Sunday, and it's 9:40 on Saturday, and I still haven't gotten anything from them. So it's changing minute by minute,
Yeah.
but it's changing in a positive direction.
Right,
Which is
heading
good.
the right way. Yeah.
Absolutely
We're-
right.
You know, maybe some want to go faster, but at least we're moving in the right direction. We're getting there.
Yeah.
But, okay, so why don't we close with the Lord's Prayer and then we'll head out. It's beautiful today. It's going to be a great day. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
And
Thy kingdom
Like,
come,
come,
thy will be
and
done
We
done
done.
on earth as
on
it
earth as it is in heaven.
is. Give us this
Give us
day.
this day our daily bread.
Bread.
Forgive us our
Give us
trespasses
our trespasses.
as
as
we forgive
forgive
those
those who trespass
Trespass against us.
Lead us
And
not
and
into
lead us
temptation,
not into temptation.
but deliver us
from
from
Right.
evil.
thine is
Thine
the
is the
kingdom
Kingdom
and the power
Power
And the
Lord,
and
glory.
forever.
forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Great
Okay,
discussion today.
Thank you.
thank you.
Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you in
Good.
worship in person or online tomorrow.
Okay,
Right.
Will do.
All right.
Bye now.